Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Well guys, I'm putting together an odds and ends video for you this week because once again we got stuff piling up over here on the bench, and as I like to do with these odds and ends videos, I like to share with you guys new things that are coming into the shop. Some of the stuff is viewer mail, some of it may be some purchases or what have you, but just interesting items that have come into the shop that I think some of you guys will enjoy. Also, we've done a lot of work on the shop over the last month or so, and I want to give you guys an update. I mean, we are like this close to having the wood shop pretty much ready to move machinery into, and in fact, my plan right now is to be working on doing that coming up next weekend. I'm hoping to start moving some machinery in there and starting to get that in the shop set up. And we got things going on this side of the shop too. I will say, I know that a couple of you guys out there have sent in some things for me to do for you, and I told you guys when I started this, it might take me a little while to get to them. Man, I've been so focused on the shop really all summer that I'm running a little bit behind on some of my projects, but now with the wood shop pretty much coming to a finish, I'm hoping to be able to get back on some of these projects pretty quick, which will also make many of you guys happy because there'll be more machining content coming up as well. So with that, let's get right into the odds and ends, and to kick it off, I want to just mention coming up in September, in about a month from now when this video posts and goes live, it's going to be time again to have our annual ARNFest event. A-R-N-F-E-S-T is a play on word. ARN kind of meaning iron with old machinery. It's basically a celebration of vintage machinery. It's a get together. This is, I think, the 14th annual ARNFest event to be held up at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois. And I have actually been to every single one of them to date, and plan to continue going. I really enjoy this event. So the dates for this is going to be September 20 through 23rd. It's a Thursday through Sunday event. However, really Saturday is kind of the big day for it. That's when most people show up. The Thursday's really not, there's a little bit going on. Friday, things really kick off good. Saturday is, like I said, that's the big day. And Saturday mornings always starts with a big swap meet out in the parking lot. People will bring in stuff, set up on their tailgates, etc. And there's always a lot of good deals and bargains out there. So if anybody's interested in coming to this event, it is open to the public. There is a fee to come, though. There is a registration fee. And for the details, you can go online to arnfest.com, ARNFEST.com. And you can check things out there and register online. I hope that many of you guys will decide to make a trip over there, particularly the ones that are local to the area. It's always a lot of fun. And if nothing else, just show up for the swap meet on Saturday morning. It's worth the price of admission just to do that. And the swap meet usually goes on until mid to late morning sometimes, and then we start doing some other things going on. Some people will leave tables set up most of the day, but the majority of it is probably starting around 8 o'clock and going to, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock, something like that. I noticed that Mr. Pete, Lyle Peterson, is signed up to come. He's been the last couple of years. Not sure about any other YouTube creators at this point in time. Hopefully a couple of those other guys may decide to come in. I will mention too, and I'll mention this again in a minute, but Mark Rotowski, who is the guy that does the tool repair, indicator repair, rebuilds indicators and so forth, is planning to be there at the swap meet, and he's going to have a little special deal going on, I understand. So, and I'll mention that here in a minute. But ARNFest is coming up September 23rd, 2018. If you're watching this video sometime later down the road, typically it's held in late September each year, and you can go to that website again, arnfest.com, for more information and to register. And I hope to see many of you guys show up there and swing by and say hello to me. So with that, let's get on over here to some of the other items we got going on. So I mentioned Mark Rotowski and MR Tool Repair, and I'll go ahead and just show this we'll kick it off with this. But I got back several of the indicators that I had sent to Mark a while back. These were all in the toolboxes that I recently picked up. I had a couple of videos on those a while back. So we acquired a couple of wooden toolboxes with a bunch of machinist tools in them from a gentleman who had recently passed away, actually from his wife. And there was, I don't know, there was probably 10 or 12 indicators in there. And these are the first ones that Mark went through and basically rebuilt for me. Now, these things they were all, you know, I wouldn't say they were just in terrible shape, but they were all unusable as they were when I acquired them. The crystals were all, you know, were just yellowed over time, and most of them, while, you know, you could tell they were working, they were just so stiff that they just weren't even useful. So he went through these, totally rebuilt them. He does a great service, guys. I'm telling you, very reasonable in price to get these things fixed. The actual price does vary somewhat depending on what needs to be done to the indicator. So I really don't want to give out prices for him. That's really something that he has to look at it and tell you. But if you do have any old machinist tools that have issues, and I've mainly used him for indicators, but he works on pretty much any type of precision measuring equipment. So if you got anything that has a problem that needs to be repaired, you can get in touch with Mark. And this is what he does. He does this professionally. He works for a company full time, but he also has this business on the side. I think the business that he's doing now, his dad started, and he has a lot of the same equipment that his dad had. So he's at least second generation doing this, does an outstanding job. Now, I mentioned before that Mark's going to be at ARNFest, at least that's what he told me. And I know that he's planning on being at the swap meet on Saturday morning. And he's going to be running a little ARNFest special, from what I understand, where if you bring any tools to him at ARNFest and deliver them there to him, he will, of course, look at them and tell you what he can do with them right there on site. He may not be able to give you a price on something until he gets into it and sees what it is, what all is going to need to be repaired. But he can usually tell you pretty quickly if he can do something with it or not. But then if you do it at ARNFest, he's basically going to have the return shipping is going to be free on them. So a little bit, you can save a little bit of money there. If you're coming to ARNFest, bring all your old tools. Like I said, Mark's going to be there, and he can work with you on getting them all fixed up. So let's go to the next item. So next item here, this is kind of cool, I think. It's a little bit different, a little bit off the wall compared to most stuff that I have, but really a nice little item and a really cool piece from a viewer, Chad Hilkman, up in Glendale, Arizona. And Glenn collects these little cedar boxes like this. These are made by Lane. And Lane was a furniture builder, I guess, going way back. And there's a little bit of history to this. And I'm going to just read what he wrote in his letter because it kind of explains about this. He says, around 1925, Lane, the cedar chest manufacturer in Alta Vista, Virginia, started gifting these little boxes to girls when they graduated from high school through their furniture dealers over the country. The Girl Graduate Plan was very successful, and over the years, Lane made and distributed over 27 million of these little boxes. The marketing plan to get these and young ladies and their parents to the Lane dealer to consider the purchase of a full-size cedar box was groundbreaking, and it was one of the efforts of a manufacturer to market directly to young girls. There were several variations of the boxes made, and the one enclosed is the latest version dating from the early 1950s to the 1990s. Anyway, that's a little bit of the history on the box. And like I said, he collects these. He found this one, I think, on eBay or somewhere. I'm not sure where. I don't know if he says in there. But what's interesting about it, I'm going to open it up, is that this one here was actually presented by the Knights Furniture Company of Tifton, Georgia. And when he found this, he said it was in pretty bad shape. He had to do some restoration work to it. There's a little bit of damage on the top, but still it's a nice little box in good condition. I'm putting his card in here because he did mention that if anybody out there is interested in these or wants to know more about them or has boxes, whatever, he's looking for other collectors who might collect these boxes. He doesn't know of really anybody else that does that. So that's his contact information, and he actually wanted me to share that. So anyway, it's a really neat little item here, and I thank Chad very much for sending this along. And he did ask if I was familiar with the Knight Furniture Company, which was, of course, inside the box here. And, you know, I moved to Tifton back in, it was about 1989 when I came to college down here many years ago. And right before I came, I mean, literally within months, the big talk around town was there was a huge fire that had happened. I mean, it was like one of the biggest fires I think the city had ever had, and it was actually the Knight Furniture Company that had caught on fire. And it was in an old tobacco warehouse, kind of back on the backside of downtown, and destroyed the property or whatever. The family, I think, shut down the furniture company at that time, although they were still in an appliance business here in Tifton up until very recently. Knight's Appliance Company, I'm very familiar with them. But they have a very long history here in Tifton, the Knight family does. My father-in-law, who has been living here since sometime in the 1960s, was very familiar with the company, and he really found this a neat piece of history as well. But anyway, thank you, Chad, for sending this along. And my plans for this, you talked about the history in here of these being presented to young girls when they graduate from high school. I happen to have a daughter who's going to be graduating from high school later this year, or this coming year, and this I think is going to be a gift for her when we get there. So anyway, thanks you very much, Chad, for sending that along. My whole family enjoyed this one. My daughter hasn't seen it yet, but my wife really enjoyed it. My in-laws really enjoyed it because of the local Tifton history involved with it. So thanks very much for sending that. Next items here. This is kind of interesting, a cool little collection here. I've been back in touch with my good friends now over at Osborne. Osborne, of course, being a manufacturer of all kinds of abrasive equipment, brushes and brooms and et cetera, contacted me a while back, was kind enough to send me a nice collection of grinding discs and stuff to use in the shop. And when I was chatting with them recently, they said, hey, is there anything else that we could help you out with? And I mentioned that I had a couple of bench grinders, some Baldor bench grinders that I've been wanting to get set up for a while with some abrasive wheels for doing restoration work. I've got a little cheap grinder in here now that has a wire wheel on one side and like a Scotch-Brite pad on the other, Scotch-Brite wheel on the other. And I've actually got two Baldor grinders that I've been needing to get wired up and running for a long time, but I haven't had any wheels to put on them. And my plan was I wanted to put wire wheels on one with a coarse and a fine, and then put like a polishing or whatever, deburring type wheel on the other, something along the lines of like a Scotch-Brite wheel, again with a coarse and a fine wheel. And I said, what can you guys help me out there with? So they were kind enough to send me these wheels to use on my grinders. I got the bushings to go along with them to fit on my actual, gave them all the specs on my grinders. One of them was a 10-inch grinder, one of them was an 8-inch grinder. And anyway, they sent this along to me to try out. So I'm really anxious to get these installed. I need to do a little more work to the grinders first before they're ready to go. Basically just getting them wired up where I can plug them in. I'm really kind of anxious to try these out. So let me show you these in the catalog. So these are kind of it's kind of a, I don't know what the actual material is. It feels kind of like a plastic type material, but I don't think it's actual plastic, but it's got an abrasive on there with different grits. And again, it's kind of used for deburring, polishing, etc. They use them for all kinds of applications here. But he basically, again, sent me a coarse and a fine. They've got lots of different versions of this. I'm not exactly sure which one. I think it's this one here. They're fast cut wheel brushes is what they call these. But anyway, I'm really anxious to get these hooked up and where I can try them out. Of course, these are just regular wire wheels, but again, got both a really aggressive coarse wheel, and this one's pretty fine. So I want to be able to do on both delicate stuff, and then when I'm just trying to rip paint and grime and whatever off, these wire wheels are great for that. So anyway, really nice there. Also, they sent along a broom head, and I got the handle for it over here as well, but that doesn't fit up on the bench real well. But they sent that along. They also make these brooms from Osborne. So anyway, some nice little accessories for the shop. So anyway, again, I'll mention, Osborne, go check them out if you're interested in this kind of stuff. I've been using their wheels now, their grinding disc and cut-off wheels and so forth for, a month or two that they've sent them to me. And so far, I've been very impressed with them. As far as the cutting and so forth goes, I can't say that I think that they're, just vastly superior to anybody else. But what I have noticed on the wheels is that they really seem to be holding up much longer than the ones I have been using, which is just the stuff I get like at Lowe's or what have you. but the quality does seem to be in that they're not wearing out as fast or holding up better. So I've been impressed with them so far. Time will tell, and I'm sure all this stuff's going to get a lot of use over the period of time. Thank you to the fine folks at Osborne. You can check them out at osborne.com if you're interested in stuff, and a lot of their items are for sale on Amazon as well. Well, guys, have several people that have sent books in to me again from my library collection, which just seems to be growing. I'm getting quite the collection of shop and STEAM-related items, which are all interesting to me, and I always appreciate these. This first group of books here is going to come from Eric Levin, who is up in Freehold, New Jersey, and he was cleaning out some stuff and found some things that he thought I might be interested in. First one, this book here on shop theory. Interesting here that this one here was put together by the Henry Ford Trade School. Has copyrights going from 1934 up to 1942, which is probably about when this one was. And just lots of just basic information here, tool identification, how to use tools, different things that are in here. It's a really good basic reference book on machine shop work in general. So I'm always enjoy looking at these kind of things, so I'm interested to get into this one and check it out. So there's some planing and shaper work, and here's some nice stuff on cutting dovetails and measuring dovetails. Yeah, this has got a lot of good stuff in here. So anyway, that's one of the books he sent. Next book here is Jigs and Fixtures, 1938 date on it. Red Colvin. You see a lot of books by him, a lot of reference books. So he was an authority, I guess, out there. So Jigs and Fixtures is basically on making things, work holding things a lot, as well as jigs and stuff for tools in the tool and die business. So this is an area that I'm not as much of a specialist in. So again, it'll be a good reference book to work with. There's some milling machine stuff there. Interesting stuff. Here's one on ferrous materials for the engineer, 1948. This one's interesting. RCA Laboratories Division. In fact, it's got up here in the front. RCA Laboratories Library. And of course, it's been withdrawn, but a little bit of history there. That's kind of neat. RCA, of course, was a major manufacturer of radios and later televisions in the early part of the U.S. history, and as far as I know, I think they're actually out of business now, which is unfortunate, but lots of interesting stuff in here. So here's a neat one. This one will probably end up getting scanned and put up on my website because it's actually a manual from the Jones Lamson Machine Company for the flat turret lathe, the Hartness Flat Turret Lathe Manual, and dated 1914, and basically on how to use a turret lathe. Look at their old turret lathe with the belting going up to the line shaft, and there's an early motor version of one. So anyway, that'll be a nice addition for the site. There's some work coming off of turret lathes. Neat. I cut my teeth in the machine shop as a turret lathe operator when I was hired as a machinist or machine shop apprentice back in the late 1980s when I got out of high school. My first job was running a turret lathe, so that brings back a lot of memories. Elementary machine shop practice. This one is also out of the RCA library, and dated 1924. So another nice book for the collection, and another one with a little bit of history behind it there. So next, I got this book here. This is from Bill Lorenzen, who's down in Tampa, Florida, and he come across this nice book on the Navy reciprocating engines and auxiliary machinery, 1914. This one was actually at one time in the United States Naval Academy, Department of Marine Engineering and Naval Construction, and I think he told me that this was actually a textbook that would have been used by the Naval Academy in the early 1900s to teach how to use or teach about naval steam engines, which was the main propulsion unit on ships at that time. So this is another really cool book with some nice history to it, so that'll be a nice one for the library. Thank you, Bill, for sending that along. Next one here, another book. This one comes from Jack Frick, who is down in Stuart, Florida. Jack actually came by and visited me a while back last fall, and him and his wife had dinner with me one evening as they were coming through town. This is a course in wood turning, and he told me the binding's not the greatest in the world, but it's still a neat book. This an early book, or well, this one was copyright 1919, but printed in 1950. You can scoot that over a little bit, but a nice little wood turning book. Little flat belt powered wood lathe. Lots of neat stuff in here. I enjoy wood turning, so I'll definitely be taking a look at this one. So, another nice one for the collection. And here's another one. This one is from John Gunnels up in Evansville, Indiana. And this one's got some local history to me. It's hard to read the cover there, but this is, well, I guess I'm going to have to. So the title on this one is hard to read, but it says the Atlanta and West Point Railroad Company, as well as the Western Railroad of Alabama, and it's the rules of the operating department. And so basically this is all the rules that they had to follow on the railroads. And I actually have a copy similar to this, but it's not for a local railroad, but basically it's just got everything in here. This was custom made by that particular railroad for all the rules for their roads. And while I have another one from another railroad, it's very different than this. So I think you would see these put together for different railroads, and it would have all the rules. This was kind of a guide, and if you went to work for the company, in fact, I think it says up here in the front that, who hereby agrees to return to the proper officer when called upon from leaving the service. So this was issued to this particular person. He was an operator, J.M., I can't read that. But anyway, I guess whenever he left, he didn't return it. They probably didn't want it by then anyway, but interesting piece of history, railroading history, which is always interesting to me as well. And I'll be looking forward to taking a closer look at that. Next item here is from William Straight down in Little Rock, California. I guess not down, but over. But he sent in a couple of little pieces of tooling here. We got a 1'8" tap and a 1'8" die. And anyway, that'll be nice. I'll put that in my collection with my other taps and dies, and never know when you need this stuff. So always nice to have some tooling around. So thanks a lot, William, for sending that in. So next item here, guys, we have an interesting item nonetheless. So this comes from Kristen Korchek, I believe is how you say her name, or Korkirk. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that, Kristen. I'm sorry. But anyway, neat item. And she'd contacted me a while back. She deals in some surplus equipment and had this item show up and thought it might be something that we could use. And you might ask, well, what is it? I didn't even know what it was. I had to do some research on it myself when she first mentioned it. And actually, I said, this might be something we could use for sure. So what this is used for is for calibrating gauges, like steam gauges and stuff such as this, any kind of gauge. This happens to be an old steam gauge that I've got in my collection. And what you would basically do is you would mount that gauge over here on this side. There's a bunch of different fittings for different size gauges or whatever you'd mount it over here. And from what I understand, and like I said, there's actually some YouTube videos out there on how to use this, and I've looked at them, but I haven't actually used this yet. But I believe it has a kind of a fluid, it's like an oil or something like that that's in here that goes from this side over to this side. And what you do is you put weights on this side here, and when you put the weight on here, it transfers, and I think there's a mechanical advantage in here, it transfers it over here where you can read a pressure over here. You basically can calibrate it. So I've got a stack of weights. For example, this is a 10 pound per inch weight, and if you wanted to calibrate it for 10 pounds per square inch, you'd put that on there. And we have different weights. These are some 20s, 50s, I believe. That's a 50, that's a 100 pound, and then there's some, I think there's like a 175 pound weight in there or something like that. One of them is a little bit different than a bunch of 200-pound weights. So using these different combination of weights, you stack them up over here. The weight is then transferred over to pressure that you read on your gauge, and you can go through a process here and calibrate your gauge to make sure your gauge is reading properly. If it's, and there are companies that you can send gauges off to be calibrated or make sure they're reading properly. In fact, we have to do that on our steam locomotive once every year or two. We have to send off the gauges and have them calibrated to make sure they're reading properly. And when we have our inspection, you got to have a current calibration sticker on there. Well, with this, I can at least test them. I'm not certified to actually calibrate, but we can at least test things to make sure they're working properly, which will be a nice addition. One thing that I really want to kind of learn how to do is also how to adjust these old steam gauges and stuff. So, because I know we've got several that are out of calibration, and our calibration service that we use, they can calibrate it, but if it's not right, they can't fix it. And I know there's a gentleman we have actually sent some gauges to that works on them, and he can actually fix them. Interesting thing is he's got one of these machines. He can check them, but he can't officially calibrate them because he's not certified to do that. But anyway, I will now have the equipment that we can check them in-house, and we do this at the museum all the time, or need to do it at the museum all the time. And hopefully this might lead into something else that I can kind of work on, is learning how to work on these gauges and make adjustments to them. I understand how the inside of them work. I'm not even going to try to explain it right now. But as far as making the adjustments to them, that's what I really don't know how to do. So nice little entry into a new area that I might get to play around with. And I want to thank Kristen for thinking of us for this. And this will hopefully make some interesting YouTube videos down the road. I also want to thank David Cazillo. David actually brought this. It was actually out in Texas, and he was going to be driving across the country, bringing his son to college up in Virginia Tech. And he came through Tifton and brought this along. And David, I apologize to you. I know David was hoping to get the opportunity to deliver this in person and get to meet me, and unfortunately, my job had me out of town the day he was coming through, so we were not able to meet personally, but he was able to take this out to the museum and leave it with someone out there for me to pick up. So thank you, David, for going out of your way to bring this to us so we didn't have to pay to have this thing shipped across country, particularly these weights. There's several hundred pounds of weights sitting right here. So thank you, Kristen, for sending it along, and David for bringing it to me. And this will be an interesting little piece of scientific instrument or whatever to play around with and get to learn how to use. So thanks a lot. Well, guys, shop update. This is something I'm really excited about because it's been a long time in the coming, but we pretty much have the wood shop into the shop finished. There are still just a few little small things I need to do in here, but by and large, I'm to a point now where we can actually start moving machinery in here and getting this side of the shop set up. So this really has been a major goal of mine to get finished this summer. And I had, of course, Miles McDonald, who is a college student that helps me. He helped me do a lot of the work that got done in here over the summer. He was home for the summer, and I had him out here working quite a bit, paying him some summer money or whatever to come out here and help me do things. So we got a lot accomplished. And this, again, has been where a lot of my focus has been this summer, trying to work on the shop itself. And I can't tell you how many hours we've put in out here, which is kind of taking me away from working on projects this summer, but it's really enabling me to get some more things going in the shop itself. So the last little push we did this past weekend, we actually rented a scissor lift, had to do some work up in the high part, and we basically worked on that all last weekend. I got all the wood paneling up on the walls up here in the high areas. We did all the trim work up top, and one thing that I'm really excited about is I have ceiling fans installed up in the top now. I've had these fans purchased now for probably 3 months and just haven't been able to get up there to get them installed, but while we had the scissor lift, we got those put in here. And it is amazing how much nicer it is to work out here with those ceiling fans going. Had a lot of guys, and I'm going to mention this because I know I'll get some comments. A lot of people said, why don't you put one of those big ass fans in there? And if you're familiar with the big ass fan, it's a name brand. And it's these great big industrial fans, and they are really awesome, guys. But honestly, when I went to price some of those things, they're proud of them, really proud of them. And so I ended up just going with a Hunter style fan. It's actually a 60-inch fan. I know it doesn't look that big up there, but that's pretty much the biggest one I could get, like at my local Lowe's or whatever. They did have a 72-inch fan in there, but I didn't like it. It looked a little bit too modern. And I also went online and looked at the reviews, and they were not reviewed very well. So these were reviewed much higher, and I'm pretty happy with them. Would like to have a little bit larger fan, but this is going to be fine. Basically, for what I paid for all four, there's two in each of the shop areas on these fans. I don't think I could have bought a single big ass fan, even a smaller one in this 60 to 72-inch range. So, but these are putting out nice air. Also finished up some electrical work in here. I had a couple last circuits of 3-phase that I needed to get ran, and that's what I spent most of my weekend, this weekend, working on, was finishing my electrical work. And I'm glad I have a big check mark beside that. I was commenting yesterday to somebody, I said, I'm sure I'll have more electrical work to do, you know, as new machines come in and new needs, specific needs that you have, you'll have to come in here and make modifications or whatever. But as of right now, all my electrical work is done until something comes along that requires me to do something special or different, which again, that's a big check mark. So I'm real happy with that. And my plan is now, now that I pretty much have this space ready to move into, is this coming weekend, which is going to be Labor Day weekend. I'm going to try to get the tractor out here with the forks on it, where I can start moving some machinery in here, and at least getting stuff set in here where we can start working on getting the wood shop set up and going. So, man, I am pumped to have this space now where I can actually come in here and start utilizing it, and hopefully you'll be able to start seeing some more video content coming out of this shop in the near future. And it's also going to enable me to not have to spend so much time working on the shop and get to spend more time working in the shop, which is going to, again, be more video content for you guys of actual projects going on, which I'm real excited about as well. And with that, that's going to be a wrap on this episode of Odds and Ends. Guys, appreciate you hanging in there with me and looking at the new items that come in there and looking at the new shop as we got it in here. You'll be seeing more of this in videos down the road. And again, I'm really excited to finally kind of have the shop. This shop has been a project now going on for almost 3 years in the building process, and it's finally nice to be able to see it kind of coming to a point. I don't know that I'll ever be through with it per se. There's always going to be things to be done to the building itself, but we are finally to a point where it's more or less complete, and you just don't know how excited I am about that. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this episode. As always, thank you for watching very much. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to my channel. Turn those notifications on so you get notifications when new videos pop up. If you don't do that, you may miss some new stuff that comes out there. So there's a little bell icon up in your YouTube on your computer or whatever, and you need to click on that, subscribe, and actually turn your notifications on to be notified when new videos come in. And leave comments if you like. Thumbs ups are always great, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching.